Rain fell that night like it was trying to wash something ugly off the earth. My phone rang at 2:47 a.m. A voice said they found her unresponsive in a holding cell. They said she slipped, broke her neck. The words didn't sound real, because my daughter didn't belong behind bars, and she sure as hell didn't die from a fall. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. When you've spent 2 decades in Delta Force, you learn to read tone more than words. Something in the deputy's voice wasn't fear, wasn't pity, it was rehearsed. I'd heard that tone before, when men tried to hide what shouldn't be hidden. The highway lights rolled across the windshield as I drove. Every sign, every tree, everything blurred into one gray ribbon. My mind kept circling the same question. What do you mean? She fell. The sheriff's station sat quiet by the edge of town, a faded building everyone forgot after dark. 2 officers stood outside smoking, avoiding eye contact as I stepped out of my truck. My shirt clung to my back, but all I felt was cold. Inside, the hallway smelled like disinfectant and wet dust. The sound of a flickering ceiling bulb echoed like a heartbeat as they led me through. A younger officer pointed to a small door at the end. "Captain Mason will talk to you," he mumbled, eyes low. The office door opened, and there he was, Mason. Sturdy, mid-40s, white uniform too clean for the hour. His face held practiced sympathy, the kind that's learned, not felt. "Mr. Collins," he began, leaning forward with folded hands. "There's been an incident." "Not an incident," I said quietly. "A death." He blinked, recovered. "Your daughter, Brooke, had an altercation earlier tonight. She was intoxicated, resisted detention. My pulse thudded in my ears. Just tell me how she became a corpse in your cell." Mason's jaw tightened. "She tripped, hit the bench wrong, broke her neck instantly. Our people tried resuscitating, but..." He let the sentence hang like smoke in the air. I watched his eyes. Trained eyes. Nerves cause micro twitches around the brow. Guilt spills through pupils before words cover them. He wasn't nervous. He was managing his story. "Where's the footage?" My voice came rougher than I meant. He shifted in his chair. "The cameras in that block failed during the altercation. Maintenance issue. Already being handled." "Right. A maintenance issue the night my daughter fell." I left before the rage inside me fractured my control. The morgue lights carved the world into white and shadow. I'd spent years watching soldiers die, but nothing prepared me for seeing her on that metal table. Brooke's skin pale, hair like tangled gold across her cheek, her throat bearing dark patches, a thumbprint under her jawline. A fall didn't leave thumbprints. I pressed my hand on the sheet near her shoulder, whispering the only apology I could think of. The doctor on duty avoided my eyes when I asked questions. He spoke in half sentences until some invisible line scared him silent. "He said she fell," I murmured. "But you've seen bodies, document. Does that look like a fall?" He hesitated too long, then said, "You might want to speak with Captain Mason." I stared at her face again, peaceful, yet wrong, and a thought clawed through the grief. He did this. Back at home, the clock hands crawled. The house smelled like disuse and dust. Her photos still lined the shelf. College graduation, her holding her first paycheck, one from last Thanksgiving where she swore she wanted to become an officer herself. The ache came in waves. She believed in law, believed in justice, and the system she trusted killed her. I opened her phone, still sealed in an evidence bag I'd convinced the deputy to let me see for closure. Password was easy, same one since she was 14. A message thread blinked open from earlier that night. "Lila, they're setting me up, Brooke. Don't come here. Brooke, too late. I'm already outside. Someone needs to show what they did to those girls." My breath froze. What girls? The timestamp was just an hour before they said she fell. Rage rose, quiet but volcanic. By morning, the funeral arrangements were already discussed through intermediaries. The department offered to cover expenses. I told them to keep their blood money. I drove back to the station under a gray sky. The streets felt emptier than usual. Inside, The front desk clerk froze seeing me again. Need to collect my daughter's personal items, I said. He hesitated, then nodded toward the evidence office. I found the cell easily, third down the hallway. Still damp smell of bleach. The bench she fell on stood bolted to the wall. For metal bolts. One slightly bent. I knelt beside it, fingers tracing where her head supposedly hit. The angle didn't match their story. Not even close. Years of training kicked in. My mind mapped distance, impact, trajectory. Those bruises on her jaw weren't from metal, they were from fingers. A door opened behind me. Captain Mason again. You're not authorized in this section, Mr. Collins. I stood slowly, meeting his gaze head-on. Neither was your conscience. He smirked faintly. You need time, sir. I understand. But don't start imagining things. Accidents happen. Accidents don't erase surveillance footage. His expression cooled. Be careful what you accuse. Words can turn real dangerous. So can truth, I said. He took one step closer until I could smell the faint burn of his cologne mixed with tobacco. You think your old Delta badge means something here. This town takes care of its own. He left those words hanging before turning away. This town takes care of its own. It wasn't a warning. It was ownership. That night, I sat at my desk, Brooke's phone glowing on the surface. Something in me refused to rest. I copied the phone back up to my old laptop, ran recovery software on deleted files. By dawn, a faint folder appeared, footage labeled Station Backup 204. Inside, one broken thumbnail. Static. Then a blurred image came into view. Two figures, one small, one larger. The larger, a man in uniform, storming into the cell. The smaller, Brooke, stepping back defensively. No sound, just motion. The figure grabbed her throat. Her knees gave out. Silence frozen in pixels. Then the video cut. Timestamp, 11:43 p.m. Same night. I sat frozen. My breath went shallow. Mason. The world narrowed to a point. This wasn't grief anymore. It was clarity made of steel. But revenge wasn't the path. Not yet. I needed proof. Records, allies, witnesses. A soldier fights with discipline, not impulse. The last light outside broke through the curtains. I slid the flash drive into a plastic case and locked it away. Somewhere deep, beneath the grief, I heard her voice again, soft, steady, filled with that stubborn courage she got from her mother. Dad, you always said the truth will surface, even if it's buried deep. I whispered, then I'll dig until it bleeds daylight. Before heading out, I looked once more at her photos. Then to my coat on the chair, her dog tags hanging from the pocket. The metal felt ice cold in my palm. Captain Mason thought I was a grieving father too broken to fight. He had no idea. Sleep never came. The hours after I found that clip dragged like interrogation lights through my skull. By dawn, the rain had stopped, but the smell of it still clung to the air. Wet concrete and something faintly metallic, like the memory of blood. I drove back to the station before shift change. The town still yawned, half asleep, unaware one of its own had strangled a young woman in a cell. The building looked smaller in daylight, harmless, bureaucratic. Evil never announces itself. It files paperwork and drinks burnt coffee behind closed doors. I waited in my truck until the cleaning lady left and the morning officers clocked in. Then I crossed the street, casual pace, clipboard in hand. Years of infiltration taught me. Act like you belong, and no one asks questions. I slipped through the side entrance toward the archive room. The lock was digital now, but the hinge screws were soft, civilian grade. Took me 3 minutes. Inside, rows of labeled tapes and hard drives lined the walls. I wasn't looking for the missing footage. I knew Mason had wiped it. I needed the maintenance logs, paper trails people forget to bury. Near the back, under a stack of weather reports, I found them. A signed work order dated the morning after Brooke died, claiming the camera in Block 3 was already repaired. Not broken before, repaired after. They'd covered it in reverse. I scanned the signature. Officer Quinn. The young one from that night. A noise outside made me freeze, Footsteps, steady and sure. I slid the papers inside my jacket, melted into shadow beside the file racks. Mason's voice drifted in, low and confident, talking to someone about press handling and media narrative. That tone again, calculated calm. My fingers tightened around a pen like it was a trigger. When he left, I counted to 10 before breathing again. Out front, Quinn stood by his cruiser, eyes darting at every passing car. Nervous, guilty, maybe both. I walked past him like a ghost until he muttered, barely audible, "You shouldn't be here, sir." He didn't make eye contact. That told me plenty. By noon, I was back home, spreading documents on the table like strategy maps. The maintenance order, the timestamps, the phone record between Mason and a city judged the same night my daughter died. The puzzle wasn't complete, but the corners were forming. Grief sharpened into purpose. My next stop was the holding cell itself. I needed physical proof that agency protocols weren't followed. I knew a back window pane that opened into the alley. Soldiers remember layouts the way poets remember rhymes. Inside the cell, sunlight sliced through barred glass, highlighting the scrubbed floor. Bleach couldn't hide everything. Kneeling, I ran a gloved hand across the lower bricks. Beneath one, faint red smear lines set into mortar, blood traces too specific to ignore. I photographed them with a disposable camera. Phones could be tracked. As I rose, the door hinges creaked. Quinn stood there again, paler than before. "You trying to get fired?" he whispered. "Already lost worse than a job." My tone made him drop his gaze. "The captain said cases closed. You dig around, you'll end up like..." He stopped himself, swallowed the rest. Then quietly added, "I didn't sign up for this." I waited. Finally, he whispered, "She didn't slip. She screamed." Before I could question more, he turned and walked off fast, shoulders tight against his badge. A minute later, his cruiser peeled out of the lot. The silence afterward felt heavier than any firefight I'd survived. At dusk, I met Lila, Brooke's closest friend, in a diner off Route 19. Neon lights trembled across her face, exhaustion in every blink. She slid a folder my way before I even asked. "She said she'd give it to you if anything happened," Lila murmured. I didn't want to believe it. Inside were printed screenshots, social posts, text threads between Brooke and other girls tied to the department. Each line heavier than the last. Complaints ignored, files lost, rumors about Mason using his badge to bury calls coming from missing persons. Brooke had tried to report it through official channels. That's what started the chain. "She told me she'd go straight to internal affairs," Lila said. Next day, she was arrested. I felt my jaw tense. For what? They said trespassing at the marina. But she was following a lead. There's a storage unit out there, used for impounded property, and something else. That night, I drove alone to the marina industrial strip. The building numbers were faint, wind slicing through rusted doors. Unit 47 sat padlocked. Around back, fence cut clean like someone already breached it once. I slipped through, heart drumming slow and deliberate. Inside, rows of seized items from police cases, bikes, boxes, half-open crates. It smelled of oil and dust. Then I saw it. An evidence container labeled BK. Pending. Her initials. Inside, a torn jacket, her phone case, and an external drive sealed with department tape. I photographed the barcode, careful not to disturb the seal. That drive might hold everything. A sudden crunch of gravel. I ducked behind a crate as a flashlight beam floated across the door. Voices, 2 men. "Captain wants it clean tonight." "Whole unit." "Yeah. Says the vet's been snooping again." My world narrowed to breath. When they turned away, I crawled toward the side exit, silently slipping into the shadows outside. My truck sat 100 yards away, but I didn't rush. Rushing meant noise. Noise meant death. Experience guided every motion until I was back on the road, unseen. In the rearview mirror, the building lights flicked off one by one, like the place exhaled a secret it could no longer hold. Back home, near midnight, exhaustion settled like armor. I laid out everything I'd gathered: the order sheet, the backup clip, Lila's folder, the storage photo. Each piece whispered the same truth. Mason wasn't covering up a mistake. He was protecting a network. The part of me trained to assess risk knew I was alone in hostile territory. But another part, the father part, didn't care. Discipline would carry me further than anger ever could. I needed allies who couldn't be bought. I reached for an old encrypted phone stored in a drawer since my deployment days and scrolled to one saved contact. Blake R. Ex-unit. Surveillance expert. Lived off-grid now. I typed. Need your eyes. Civilian op evidence extraction. Sensitive. 10 minutes later, a reply pulsed on screen. Send details. Trust no one local. Before shutting everything down, I stared at Brooke's picture on the shelf. That crooked smile, the one she used when she knew she was right. The house felt unbearably quiet. Outside, a train wailed somewhere distant, fading across the fields. For the first time since the call, I let a single tear fall. Not weakness, just release. Then I whispered something to the darkness. Hold on, kid. I'm coming. The files glowed faintly on the desk, fragments of truth waiting to be stitched together. Tomorrow, Blake would arrive. And then the hunt would begin, not for revenge, but for every lie that kept her story buried. Because a soldier doesn't stop when ordered to. He stops when the mission's complete. Morning arrived without color. The sky was bruised gray, the kind that promised another storm. Blake's truck slid to a stop outside my house. 3 years since I'd seen him, but time hadn't dulled the sharpness in his eyes. He stepped out wearing a field jacket heavy with tech gear instead of ammo. Didn't think I'd see you chasing ghosts, he muttered, scanning the quiet street. Not ghosts, I said. Murderers in uniform. He followed me inside. The table looked like a crime board. Photos, maintenance slips, timestamps, notes scrawled in red marker. Blake studied it silently before pulling out a tablet. Let's see how deep this rot goes. Within an hour, he was inside the department's archived server. Mason's name appeared again and again. Incident reports redacted, charges dismissed, budget transfers unaccounted for. But the deeper he dug, the more firewalls appeared, too organized to be normal security. They built a digital fortress, he said. Means they have something worth hiding. Any chance surveillance backups survived? He raised a brow. If they did, they're off-site. Usually kept with county internal affairs. So that was our next battlefield. At the internal affairs office, a woman named Harper met us in the lobby. She wore civilian clothes, but had the posture of someone trained to hold her ground. I used to serve, she said quietly once her staff left. I saw your daughter's case. None of it sat right. She led us to her desk, where she slid a thin folder across. Inside, the official death report, cause of death, accidental trauma from blunt force. No mention of the missing footage. But tucked behind it, a note in smaller handwriting, request denied. Retain original copy off record. No signature. Harper tapped the page. That means someone up the ladder blocked secondary review. Probably Mason's ally at the prosecutor's office. I studied her expression. It carried the same fatigue I felt. If you help me pull the full archive, I said, you'll make enemies. She smiled faintly. Already have a few. By midnight, Harper extracted an encrypted list of officers flagged for internal misconduct. 5 names resurfaced in old complaints. Each case dismissed under Mason's supervision. One detail cut through everything. All incidents occurred in a 3-month period linked to youth disorder arrests, including Brooks. The pattern wasn't random. It was a machine. Blake leaned over my shoulder. Whole precinct's a shield wall. If you try standard channels, they'll smear you like they did that vet last year. He was right. The local paper had already hinted at a grieving parent interfering with due process. The machinery was already spinning against me. So I changed approach. You don't storm a fortress head-on. You dig beneath the walls. I followed Quinn that evening after his shift, keeping 2 cars between us. He drove to a convenience store on the edge of town, parked facing away from cameras, and sat there motionless for several minutes. When he finally got out, his face looked hollow, haunted. I stepped from my car and approached quietly. He didn't react, just stared at the cracked asphalt. "They told me to keep quiet," he said without prompting. "Said accidents happen. Investigations complicate lives." His hands shook around a cup of stale coffee. I saw what he did. She didn't fight him. She begged him to stop. The admission hung between us. "Then why protect him?" I asked. "Because the last guy who talked ended up dead on US 41. He glanced at me, eyes wet. "Mason's got friends in every corner." He left before I could say another word. Back home, Blake had converted my living room into a digital ops post. Monitors glowed with city schematics, department servers, unlisted files. Harper joined via secure line, whispering updates as if the walls had ears. "Mayor's office interfering with audit," she said. "Anything you find, back it up twice, and hide one copy offline." Minutes later, Blake grinned, the kind of grin that means danger. "Found a ghost partition on Mason's desktop backup. Looks like it was wiped halfway, but not fully." He ran a recovery script. Code flickered fast. One image reformed on screen, a still frame of the corridor outside Brooke's cell, time-stamped 30 minutes before she died. Mason stood there arguing with another officer, Quinn. In the background, faint motion near the door. Then the file cut out. "Corruption goes higher," Harper murmured. "If we leak without proof of chain command, they'll bury it again." I knew what she meant. One wrong move, and it becomes the grieving soldier's vendetta, not a confession of guilt. So we planned phase 2. Trace the data trail to anyone Mason reported to. Exposure required precision, patience, and the instincts I once used for covert missions overseas. Only this time, the target was home soil. As dawn cracked, I walked outside for air. The street was still, framed by the soft hum of early traffic. In moments like that, soldiers think about failure, loss replaying in loops. But standing there, I realized my daughter's death had shown me an old truth. Evil hides best behind routine. People sign papers, pour coffee, nod through meetings, while someone's life gets deleted in silence. Not this time. Blake stepped onto the porch holding a printed sheet. "You're going to want to see this." It was Mason's weekly correspondence log. One line in bold. "Private call, Judge Preston Hale, /2219 hours 10 minutes before Brooke's arrest." Everything suddenly fit. The reason the hospital report vanished, why internal affairs was blocked, why Mason looked me in the eye and smiled. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting the system that fed him. I watched sunrise wash over the roofs, colors spilling into gray. For the first time since the call, something inside me hardened into direction, not rage. The next step wasn't confrontation. It was strategy. Find Preston Hale. Follow the money. Follow the favors. Because the Delta in me doesn't knock on doors. He dismantles them, quietly, piece by piece, until the truth left hiding has nowhere else to go. The morning heaved itself awake under a low ceiling of clouds. News vans had returned to the station parking lot, feeding on the official story of a tragic accident. The world loves closure, not truth. It prefers tidy narratives wrapped in uniforms. From my porch, I watched neighbors avoid my eye. One waved, half-hearted, then hurried back inside. In a town built on favors, silence was currency, and everyone was suddenly rich. Blake sat at my kitchen counter, rough stubble and coffee gone cold. Harper called. "Someone tipped Mason you've been digging," he said. "Then we dig louder." I answered. He smirked, tapping his laptop. "Already ahead. Found bank transfers tied to the judge, 3 routed to a charity that doesn't exist." The word charity stung. Brooke spent summers raising money for soldiers' kids. The irony was salt in the wound. Harper joined us an hour later, tension faster than caffeine. "Press conference today. Mason's pushing narrative control. Claims your daughter suffered cardiac arrest. They'll roll out the medical staff who signed off. Doc on night shift." I asked. She nodded. "Same one who refused to answer you." The walls of power were closing, not with guns but paperwork and public opinion. Soldiers die by bullets, civilians by reputation. By noon, the courthouse square filled with spectators. I stood near the edge, sunglasses hiding familiar fury. Mason stood on the steps flanked by uniforms polished into mirrors. His voice carried smooth and practiced words about service, tragedy, community trust. Cameras clicked like insects. Then he said it. Mr. Collins has experienced unimaginable loss. We ask for his patience as proper channels complete review. Proper channels. The same ones that killed her. Harper's whisper came through my earpiece. Feeds live. We clip this later. Don't engage yet. But something in Mason's smirk pulled the leash too tight. When it ended, I moved through the crowd, blending among reporters until I reached the building's side entrance. Harper met me inside, badge flashing. We slipped into a conference room designated for logistics. 2 minutes before anyone notices, she warned. We pulled up the internal broadcast feed. Blake's remote access sent compressed files sliding into storage. An unfiltered mic had captured Mason off script. A laugh, then low words to another officer. He can cry all he wants. It's over. Proof wouldn't come as spectacle. It would come as accumulation. That night, wind rattled windows like old memories. Lila called, voice uneven. Someone's been parked across from my apartment all day. Dark SUV, no plates. I paced the living room. Pack a bag. Go to Harper's office. Use the back entrance. She'll keep you safe. Blake muted his keyboard long enough to say, they're putting pressure on witnesses. Classic containment move. My phone buzzed again, unknown number. A text, single line. Stop digging or join her. I saved it, forwarded to Harper's secure server. She replied seconds later. Got it. Pattern matches burner used by local off-duty unit. The circle tightened. At sunrise, I drove through downtown. Posters for the annual parade flapped against telephone poles. Flags, slogans, forced patriotism. The same city that saluted soldiers was protecting one who strangled my child. Passing the diner where Brooke used to work weekends, I stopped inside. The waitress, older, eyes red from worry, whispered across the counter. They came by asking what she said last shift. I didn't tell them anything, swear it. Who? The captain's men. They said she was drunk that night. She wasn't. She only had coffee. I thanked her quietly. Truth hides best among ordinary people who still have a conscience. Back home, Blake paced before the television. Local news anchor reading from prompt. Inside sources confirm internal review clears Captain Mason of wrongdoing. He threw the remote onto the couch. They're staging closure. If the state signs off, case sealed forever. Harper's voice through speakerphone. We still have one route, the Federal Oversight Board. But we need solid evidence of collusion. Something undeniable. My gaze lingered on the folder labeled B.K. Pending. The drive in that marina unit might still exist. Then we go back. Blake frowned. They burned that site. Not everything burns. That evening the two of us drove toward the marina again, headlights off for the final mile. The night smelled of salt and engine oil. Floodlights were gone. Only moonlight pooled between rusted shipping containers. We crept to Unit 47. The main lock was gone, melted at edges. Inside, ash and warped metal. Still, old instincts told me to check perimeters. A vent grate near the floor had fresh screws. Blake unscrewed them, reached in, and drew out a plastic evidence bag half melted, but intact. Inside, a small chip, data shard labeled 47A_backup. We exchanged a look. No words. Back in the truck, laptop booted. Blake inserted the chip through converter port. Code strings flickered. Then a blurry still of hallway camera emerged. Brooke escorted by 2 officers. Then Mason entering frame, angry motion. She spoke, blurred lips reading what looked like, "You can't hide this." The image froze mid-frame as static flared. Blake exhaled. That's chain reaction shutdown. He manually overwrote after this frame. Still enough to show contact. Harper said over line. I didn't answer. My hands trembled, the kind of tremor that precedes resolve, not fear. Within hours, Harper arranged covert transfer of the file to an out-of-town journalist she trusted. But by morning, that journalist's office had been broken into, computers wiped, story scrubbed. Memory of Delta training filtered back. If your primary plan fails, switch terrain. I looked out the window at the waking town. Children waiting for buses. Officers directing traffic. Everyone pretending not to see the rot beneath uniform blue. They think silence protects them, I said. Let's show what silence costs. Harper only answered. Then things are about to get loud. By evening she called again, tone urgent. Our leak forced the department into panic mode. Internal emails show emergency meeting tomorrow. Mason, the mayor, Judge Hale, all attending. If we intercept those comms, we tie them together. Blake grinned through exhaustion. Time for field work. He began building a receiver rig for municipal signals. Old military hardware, now recycled for justice. The hum of soldering filled the house, while thunder rolled outside. I leaned against the window, watching raindrops gather, slide, merge into lines like tears across glass. The whole town shimmered in those reflections, truth trying to surface through weather that refused to clear. When the clock reached midnight, Harper sent the first decoded snippet. Voices, muffled but clear enough. Reporter gone rogue. Make it look like overdose. If he keeps pushing, we'll bury him too. That he was me. Blake looked at me over the hum. You wanted undeniable proof. You just got it. Somewhere beyond the thunder, sirens wailed in the distance, moving fast, uncertain who they were coming for. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It drummed on the roof like a relentless memory, washing over everything except the truth itself. Blake barely slept. Harper pulled double shifts behind a firewall of fake credentials, and I kept replaying the frame of Brooke standing in that hallway. Defiant, alive only seconds before he ended her breath. By the third morning, exhaustion fused into clarity. If the corruption fed on fear, we needed someone who still believed in consequence. That chance came through a trembling voice message left on my burner phone. This is Ivy. Dispatch. I know what happened that night. The name hit me. Harper had mentioned a dispatcher too scared to testify. She wanted to meet outside city limits. Blake and I drove an hour through fog toward a decaying motel overlooking the interstate. Ivy waited near a broken vending machine, hood pulled low. She looked 20-something, pale from sleeplessness. You didn't hear this from me, she said before I could speak. They deleted the official logs, but the backup system and dispatch run separately. I saved a copy the second I saw Mason drag your daughter into that cell. Told no one. Not till now. Her hands shook as she pulled a flash drive from her pocket. If they find out I still have it, I'm dead. I glanced at Blake. He nodded, slid the drive into a secure case. We'll handle protection, I told her. No one handles anything here, she whispered. People vanish. Ask Officer Grant. He tried reporting misconduct last spring. They found him suicidal in his cruiser. The wind rattled loose metal along the roof. Every sound felt like a warning. Stay out of sight tonight, Blake said. We'll set you up safe. She gave a small nod, then disappeared into the mist like someone already erased. Back at the house, Harper joined by remote feed as we decrypted the drive. Line by line, timestamps scrolled into view, calls recorded, internal chatter, fragments of truth. Then audio. Mason shouting over radio static. Contain her before tape goes out. I'll handle it myself. All three of us went silent. Harper exhaled first. That's confession by intent. Enough for preliminary federal review if we route through secure channels. But Blake didn't look relieved. If Ivy's name is on this metadata, she's target number 1. We move quick. I transferred the logs to 2 encrypted drives, stashing one beneath floorboards. Blake scrubbed her identifiers from the file. Only after did the dull noise of safety, temporary and fragile, settle between us. Near midnight, the phone rang again. Harper's voice, Clipped. Local paper just ran an anonymous leak. Claims Mason under investigation for disciplinary misconduct. He'll suspect you. Exactly what I wanted. Because a man like Mason doesn't show weakness until pride feels cornered. I geared up quietly. Dark clothes, no gun, just the calm rhythm familiar from recon nights long ago. Blake watched me shoulder my jacket. You walk near him now, he might shoot first. That's fine, I said. I just need to see his eyes when his story starts to crack. The station lot glowed under flickering lamps. I stayed in the truck until Mason stepped out the main doors, sleeves rolled, talking into his phone. Then I moved, slow stride, controlled rhythm. He noticed me halfway across the pavement, stiffened under the rain. You spying on me, soldier boy, he said, half laughing, half testing. No need, I answered. Your voice carries further than you think. He frowned, confusion twitching before realization. He knew. The leak. The witnesses. His temper flared, but his posture stayed casual. People love conspiracy stories. Makes grief easier. Keep telling yourself that, I said quietly. Because when those tapes reach D.C., you'll need a new story, preferably one you can tell behind glass. For a second his mask cracked. The cornered animal reflected there, a predator smelling cage walls. But then headlights cut across the lot. 2 cruisers rolled in, and he smiled like nothing happened. Next time, Collins, try therapy instead of melodrama. I left before rage turned physical. Revenge wouldn't serve her. Justice would. 2 hours later, Harper called again, voice trembling. Ivy's apartment's on fire. Neighbors saw 2 men leaving in an unmarked truck. My heart dropped. Blake checked the feed. Local scanner already reporting accidental gas leak. We drove to the address anyway, sirens receding by the time we arrived. The building stood hollowed, windows belching smoke. Firefighters moved like ghosts through embers. No body recovered yet, but probability hung like ash. I stood behind the barricade, heat baking my face, replaying her nervous smile at that motel. She'd risked everything just to speak. Flames crackled a language I didn't need to translate. Silence enforced. Blake touched my shoulder. She got us the proof. That can't burn. And he was right. Grief hardened into intent again. A quiet, surgical intent. Every soldier knows loss. Few learn how to weaponize it without losing themselves. I would make her voice echo long after these sirens faded. At dawn, Harper confirmed backup servers safely duplicated the files. But she warned, lines are blurred now. You, me, Blake, we're all targets of internal surveillance. We push forward, we do it knowing exposure might cost everything. I looked out toward the horizon, smoke curling like punctuation marks against new light. They burned a witness to erase her story, I said. Ours will burn brighter. The signal crackled. Her reply came steady. Then we light the fuse. That evening I laid Brooke's photo atop Ivy's salvage drive. 2 women silenced by the same power, yet both refusing to disappear quietly. The weight of that truth anchored my hands firm on the desk. Mason thought threats and fires could reset the board. He forgot something every soldier learns. Tactics evolve, but conscience has infinite reloads. Tomorrow we deliver the audio to federal intake through Harper's off-site contact. And once that door opened, half this town's secrets would spill out with it. I turned off the lights, leaving the drive's tiny indicator blinking in darkness like a heartbeat that refused to die. The world outside pressed with that heavy silence that only comes before revelations. By now, sleep was a memory. Every creak of the house felt like someone stepping closer to the truth, or to us. Harper's encrypted call arrived at dawn. The backup Ivy gave us led somewhere we didn't expect, she said. There's a private folder-level path that references county impound inventory, notation C case 47. Case 47, the number stamped across Brooke's storage unit file. Blake already had the systems open by the time she finished speaking. His fingers danced over keys while lines of code scrolled down the screen. Access trail runs through Mason's credentials, then diverts into statewide network for seized contraband. But the cargo listings are wrong. Missing serials, wrong weights. Meaning? I asked. Meaning they moved more than evidence, he said. They used official storage to traffic people. The word hung in the air, savage and electric. Brooke hadn't been chasing petty corruption. She'd uncovered something monstrous. Harper's tone sharpened. Those reports match a federal investigation stalled last year. Missing young women connected to drug-related arrests, most last seen in Mason's jurisdiction. My throat tightened around the kind of fury that shakes without heat. All the fragments snapped together. Her late-night research, Lila's warnings, the silence that followed her death. She died because she found the system underneath the badge. We moved quickly, methodical but relentless. Harper's contact inside the Justice Network needed hard proof. Physical shipping manifests, signatures, cross-state transactions. Blake traced Mason's access logs to a warehouse on the outskirts, registered to a shell company called Blueland Security Logistics. He looked up from the monitor, eyes grim. That place backs right against the old freight tracks. Perfect for off-record transfers. I felt the old soldier in me click into focus again. Then that's where the truth lives. The warehouse hid behind overgrown fences, steel walls streaked by rust and rain. We parked a mile off and moved on foot, the evening air thick with the hum of insects. Blake carried a handheld scanner. I carried a camera and the kind of patience fields teach you before explosions. Through a side window, faint light pulsed. Two figures, uniforms, not city issue, loading crates marked evidence disposal. Every code number ended in -47. He whispered, "They're purging records. Tonight's cleanup." Inside, boxes stretched end to end, each tagged with fake impound stamps. Among them sat one sealed crate carved with deeper etch, BK02. Brooks' initials again. We snapped photos, captured serials, then slipped back into the dark before headlights appeared outside. Engines started. A truck convoy began moving toward the highway. "They're moving the line," Blake said. "Once those are gone, the case goes with them." Harper's voice burst through the earpiece. "Give me those plate numbers now. I'll route them through federal tracking." I whispered numbers while watching taillights fade into the night until only silence and the echo of my pulse remained. Hours later, we gathered in Harper's small office, the hum of fluorescent light masking our exhaustion. She projected the plates onto a screen where government seals slowly overlaid them one by one. Same convoy tied to shipments flagged last quarter by Homeland Security. Human cargo masked as seized material. Brooks stumbled on this pattern. Mason shut her up and silenced everyone who helped. Every muscle in my chest tightened, but my mind stayed cold. So now we prove he's the hinge connecting both sides. Harper nodded. And to do that, we need the internal ledger identifying which cases fed this ring. That ledger's on the state server under restricted clearance. Blake cracked his knuckles. "Give me 30 minutes. While he worked, I stared at Ivy's recovered audio still playing faintly. The shout, the panic, the radio hiss. Bile rose with each loop. That sound would become evidence now. Soon, it would belong to history. At exactly 28 minutes, Blake cursed under his breath, half smile following. "Got it. Ledger's quarantined file delta list. Looks like Mason copied it, renamed it, and backed it to his commander's cloud." Harper's brow furrowed. "Commander, Chief of Police Victor Hale," he said. "Brother to Judge Hale." The room chilled. "Power protecting power." "This goes beyond department," I said. "She was never caught in an accident. She was caught in an empire." Harper leaned forward. "We release this without protocol. They'll shred you publicly. Let me reach a federal gatekeeper she trusts." Quiet chain. "Too slow. By tomorrow, they'll notice server breach." "Then tonight," she said simply. By midnight, Blake's upload streaked across the hidden connection inside Harper's firewall. The data poured like lifeblood into secure cloud, every byte another nail in the coffin Mason built. When done, His screen flashed transfer complete. We exhaled as if surfacing from underwater. Then headlights flared through the office blinds, 2 SUVs sliding to a stop outside. A dozen footsteps followed, heavy with intention. Harper froze. They traced signal faster than expected. I motioned toward the back exit. Files are out. We just have to make it through the night. Smoke grenades aren't military issue anymore, but Blake still kept a homemade version, in case of crowd management. He tossed one down the stairwell, the building filled with gray veil. We slipped out through an emergency door into alley ring. Engines roared behind us as doors slammed, voices shouting orders to halt. We disappeared into a tangle of industrial lots until even the echo of pursuit thinned into drizzle. Hours later, we reached the relative peace of my darkened house. Blake slumped into a chair, laughing through adrenaline. "You just dumped a hornet's nest into Washington," he said. Harper smiled faintly, hair soaked. "Then let them swarm." I sat opposite them, quiet. My pulse finally slowed enough to hear the subtle tick of the wall clock. Somewhere miles away, those files were now in hands that couldn't be bribed easily. For the first time since Brooks' death, evidence outweighed rumor. But relief felt fragile. Because men like Mason never sleep between crimes. They plan their next defense while you breathe. Blake looked over. "So what's next move?" "Wait," I said, eyes fixed on distant thunder. "When you break walls this high, you don't charge. You let gravity finish the job." And somewhere in that thunder, the first cracks of their fortress finally began to sound. Dawn carried that strange stillness that only comes after chaos. Too quiet, too careful. The rain had stopped, but the streets looked washed of color, as if the city itself was trying to hide its shame. Inside the house, coffee steamed on the table while Blake scanned breaking news. The federal leak hadn't gone public yet, but rumors were spreading online. Anonymous users posting case numbers, fragments from the ledger. Names were beginning to surface, and Mason's was one of them. Harper's voice cut through over speaker. "The storm's forming, but they'll hit back hard before the first arrest. Be ready for anything." Anything came faster than we thought. At 9 a.m., tires screeched outside. The heavy knock followed, synchronized and official. Blake opened the curtain just enough to see badges glinting in sunlight. "State Police. They're coming for you," he said softly. I stood steady. "Then we don't run. Running gives them control." Harper shouted through the line, "Do not let them take the drives. Whatever happens, protect the originals." The second knock was louder, the kind that doesn't wait for consent. By the time the door swung open, 6 officers poured inside shouting warrants, cameras flashing. My wrists hit cold metal cuffs while a voice read charges. Wire fraud, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice. All the charges Mason could weaponize before truth reached daylight. The cell they put me in was small, no cameras this time. Irony writes its own jokes. The scent of bleach stabbed the back of my throat, and for a moment I could almost see Brooks sitting where I sat, terrified but alive. When the door opened again, Mason stood there. No uniform now, just plain shirt sleeves rolled to elbows, the posture of a man pretending to play concerned colleague. "Hell of a mess you made, soldier," he said, pacing slow. "You think dumping fake files online changes anything? How long until your next cleanup?" I asked. "You running out of witnesses?" He smiled like it was a handshake. "The thing about men like you believe war makes you immortal. It doesn't. It just makes you loud before you die." He leaned closer, voice lowering. "Your daughter begged. Told me to stop. I told her truth hurts." The words dug deep, but rage held steady behind breathing drills burnt into memory. Anger was his tactic. Silence was mine. He waited for reaction. Didn't get one. Then he muttered, "Keep quiet long enough. They'll let you out. Maybe you'll even thank me for mercy." He left the door clanging shut like punctuation. Hours folded into each other. Outside the small window, daylight slipped toward orange dusk. I thought of Brooks' laugh echoing in the truck years ago on road trips, singing off-key while critiquing my map reading. Memory sharpened more than grief ever could. The sound of footsteps returned later, different rhythm. Officer I hadn't seen before, dropping a folded note near my tray before leaving without a word. I opened it. A single line of handwriting. Keep faith. We have you covered. Signed H. Harper. Relief struck like air after drowning. The next time guards changed, one of them avoided my eye, whispering, "Your friend's making noise you wouldn't believe." Stories everywhere now. Blake's work had done its damage. Overnight, the leaked data erupted across social platforms. Reporters demanded statements. Anchors repeated the same words over and over: trafficking cover-up, falsified reports, multiple officials implicated. The pressure cracked stone walls. By evening, federal agents arrived at the station, not to question, but to seize. Through the bars, I saw Mason escorted to an interview room, face gray under fluorescent light. This time, his badge didn't open doors. 2 days later, Harper walked into the holding area brandishing a court order. Her stare could have broken concrete. "You're free pending investigation," she said. "Federal oversight confirmed your evidence matches their files. You're out." The cuffs came off with one metallic click that sounded almost like freedom. Outside, air tasted different, sharper, awake. On the courthouse steps, Harper handed me a manila envelope. "Anonymous drop arrived at my office," she said. "Contains audio from Mason's internal briefings, months' worth." Someone inside their circle flipped. Inside, one clip began with Mason's own voice. "Collateral damage happens. Clean it, process it, move on." That single sentence was enough to indict half the chain of command. Blake met us by the curb with a grin that didn't hide fatigue. News outlets from 3 states are camping outside his property. He's under house watch until formal arrest. I stared across the skyline, the same one my daughter used to run beneath, believing people in uniform meant safety. Now those same streets whispered her name as justice's echo. Night fell quiet again. Freedom didn't erase grief, it just gave it direction. Sitting on the porch, I listened to the wind move through trees like distant applause for ghosts finally seen. Harper sat opposite, nursing cold coffee. "You think it ends with Mason?" she asked. "No," I said. "But he started the chain. We'll follow it until it breaks." The world around us hummed low, city lights flickering with televised scandal, court dates, suspensions. For the first time, silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like preparation for the next blow. Then, near midnight, my phone vibrated across the table. Unknown sender, single message. "You think you've won. Wait for tomorrow." I read it twice, felt my jaw clench. Mason might be caged, but his influence lived in shadows that hadn't been dragged out yet. Harper saw the text, frowned. He's desperate. But when desperate men speak, they reveal paths. Outside, thunder rolled again over the town, the same storm that had followed us since the beginning. It wasn't mercy or omen. It was the sound of old sins reaching their last night of silence. Tomorrow, those walls would finally fall. Morning broke like a storm that forgot its thunder, air heavy, restless, waiting. Newspapers hit driveways with words bold enough to split this town in half. Police captain under federal probe for homicide and trafficking. Every station ran it. Mason's face everywhere. Anger boiled where faith used to live. Harper called before sunrise. He's being transferred for arraignment. But the mayor's spinning damage control. They'll try to bury trial procedure under bureaucracy. Then we dig it out, I said. Blake joined us later at the courthouse steps, rain seeping through his collar. Crowds forming, he said, watching groups gather, half chanting for justice, half still clinging to disbelief that their polished captain could rot inside. In a way, both sides were right. People want heroes even when their capes are soaked in blood. Inside, the marble floors echoed with forced civility. Reporters pressed cameras through security lines. Federal marshals stood guard beside Mason as he was led in cuffs. Irony complete. He glanced at me once. The smirk was gone, replaced by the blank fury of a man who'd lost control. Judge Preston Hale, his old ally, presided with eyes that twitched each time the evidence projected behind him. Corruption files, stolen case numbers, the half-frame of Brooks' final seconds. Harper narrated facts like needles. When it ended, the judge called a recess not 10 minutes later. Face pale, hands trembling. He muttered something about chain of custody irregularities and left chambers hurriedly. Out in the hallway, Harper's jaw tightened. He's going to recuse himself or collapse the case. Either way, they'll delay proceedings indefinitely. I stared toward the doors where Mason had been let out. If there's no trial, his story controls the ending. Then we take the ending away from him, she said. By afternoon, online networks flooded with half-truths and edits. Shaky videos of Mason's arrest gains millions of views, mixed with false claims that evidence was manufactured. The town fractured faster than glass under pressure. Some called for reform, others for silence. Outside, protesters filled the courthouse steps carrying signs with Brooks' name. Flowers piled near the gate where she once stood in chains. For a second, that sight nearly broke me. Then it steadied instead. Harper stood beside me. The federal division has enough for interim custody, but officially they're labeling it precautionary hold. No trial date until internal inquiry finishes. Which means years, Blake muttered. They'll rotate cases till memory fades. He wasn't wrong. Justice delayed is how men like Mason live longer than truth. That night we met in Harper's dim office, fatigue sinking like lead. She poured coffee that tasted more like survival than caffeine. We still have one shot, she said, opening her laptop to a new document. Internal motion draft for civil testimony under whistleblower clause. If you testify publicly, she continued, as a former federal operative with first-hand evidence of cover-up, it forces oversight committee review. They can't suppress that. But it also paints a target on every friend you have. I thought about Brooks' photo hanging by my desk, her frozen mid-laugh beside that crooked Christmas tree years ago. Targets we already live with, I said. Blake nodded. Then we go big. Full statement press. Harper looked at me with a question unspoken. I answered by signing the authorization field on her screen. 2 days later, national networks streamed live from in front of the courthouse. Rain again. The sky seemed addicted to penance. Reporters jostled microphones until Harper stepped forward introducing me. The crowd quieted. My voice came steady, not rehearsed, stripped of everything but truth. My daughter trusted the law. She died because she believed silence meant safety. Today, that silence ends. No uniform stands above accountability, and no badge can rewrite a death certificate. No theatrics, no raised tone. Simple gravity did more damage than anger ever could. Harper's eyes glistened. Even Blake stood still. When the broadcast cut, messages flooded online. Support, outrage, confessions from other towns surfacing. The movement had name now. Her truth. Mason watched from custody, eyes hollow behind glass. But victory rarely arrives clean. By nightfall, Harper called again, voice laced with tension. An appellate motion came in, claimed evidence chain compromised due to my involvement in data transfer. The court may release him under technical misfile. I felt the air leave the room. He walks. Temporarily, she said. But cameras, public glare, they'll follow him everywhere. Temporary freedom is just a longer cell. The next day's broadcast confirmed it. Mason exiting county holding, escorted but unshackled, reporters swarming. His lawyer droned cliches about procedural errors. When microphones cornered him, his gaze found the lens, cold, direct. Some people exploit tragedy to stay relevant, he said. Truth will correct itself. He almost sounded calm, except for that tremor near the jaw. That small, human crack that gave me hope. Because fear had finally changed sides. That night the streets pulsed with noise. Protesters, reporters, curious strangers drawn by scandal's light. I stood at the edge of it all, rain sliding off my coat, watching a town strip itself bare. The system that raised fences now faced its own reflection in every wet window pane. Harper joined quietly. "We can't control what they do next," she said. "No," I answered. "But we've started something they can't stop." In distance, sirens wailed, not for danger this time, but maybe for recognition of it, for the truth that wouldn't stay buried again. Somewhere behind those sounds, I could almost hear Brooke's laughter carried on the wind, free, wild, alive in ways Mason would never be again. The trial might never happen, but justice had already begun its march. The noise never left after that broadcast. It moved in waves, online, on screens, on streets that looked the same but carried new weight. Half the town wanted me thanked. Half wanted me gone. Everyone whispered a version of truth that suited their own comfort. Harper warned, "This is the phase where power gets quiet again, not defeated, just buried until memories fade." But I could feel something else stirring too, a reckoning that had no schedule, only direction. Reporters followed for days. Trucks in driveways, phones buzzing through night, messages stacking up like unanswered prayers. Then one morning, everything shifted. I opened the door to find my porch coated in red paint. A note pinned to the railing. "End it, soldier, before it ends you." Blake scrubbed graffiti off while muttering, "Cowards make better messes than arguments." He'd moved into the spare room now. Neither of us pretended it was temporary. We were a campaign without medals, just shared insomnia. Late that afternoon, Harper arrived unannounced, her face grave. "They found Judge Hale," she said. "Car wreck off I-70. Terrible timing or convenient coincidence, depending who writes tomorrow's paper." I stared past her toward clouds bleeding into dusk. Hale had built the walls that sheltered Mason. Now the foundation itself was cracking. "They'll call it accident," I said. She nodded. But no one survives 3 rolled chambers at 70 without help. 2 nights later, I presented to a federal panel in D.C., small room, big stakes. I laid everything, recordings, documents, timelines, not as vengeance, but as history's confession. When it ended, the lead counsel shook my hand. "Mr. Collins, we'll act soon." Quietly. Quietly. Always quietly. Returning to town felt like stepping into a story that had outgrown me. Protests smaller now, faces newer. Yet behind every handshake came eyes measuring distance, loyalty recalculated hourly. Harper stayed, working within the system she'd once feared. Blake kept chasing residual data trails like a man addicted to ghosts. For me, nights grew longer. Each one replayed the same reel. Brooke in that hallway, turning to speak, her courage mid-sentence. Some memories refused closure because they were never given completion. One evening, headlights flared through curtains. A black sedan idled outside too long. I stood by the window until it drifted away, leaving behind the faint outline of fear I refused to nurture. Sleep came shallow until an explosion of glass shattered it. A brick thudded across the floorboards, tied with paper burned along edges. "Stop before more die." Blake and Harper rushed over. Police arrived slower. They photographed, asked routine questions, promised patrols. But their faces said curiosity, not protection. When everyone finally left, Harper said, "He's still pulling strings. Mason alone doesn't have reach now. Someone else inherited it." "That's fine," I told her. "We already learned how to fight ghosts." The following days blurred into hearings and headlines. Mason's interview with national media aired prime time. He played victim, claimed political sabotage. Then the interviewer dropped a question straight from nowhere. "Do you deny personal involvement in the death of Brooke Collins?" He froze. Just a second, but silence live on air lasts forever. Cameras caught the twitch, the half-smile collapsing. He muttered, "No comment." The clip spread like fire. That same night Harper called with a tremor in her voice. The oversight board advanced charges. "He's not walking this time." Maybe the system moved slow, but it was finally moving, dragged by the weight of every name he erased. A week later, I woke in a hospital room. White walls, for an arm. Harper by the window, eyes rimmed red but alive. What happened? Someone opened fire near the courthouse, she said. They missed you, but hit a bystander. Shockwave knocked you off your feet. You'll heal. The words crawled through me heavier than any wound. Another life paid for Mason's truth. Another name to burn into guilt's ledger. She added softly, public's shifting again. Anger to exhaustion. There's talk of plea bargain. He's offering information in return for reduced sentence. So the story of every coward repeats. Confess enough to survive. But survival isn't freedom. Weeks passed. I learned to walk without pain, then to speak without trembling. One afternoon, Harper handed me an envelope stamped Federal Property, Confidential. Inside lay transcript pages from Mason's recorded admission. Paragraphs of logistics, payoffs, coordination, everything his empire cost and consumed. She looked at me carefully. Once his agreement finalizes, he serves life. With no parole. For the first time since that call months ago, air moved freely through my chest. But satisfaction felt small. An ember, not fire. Brooke was still gone. Ivy too. And half a town still pretending ignorance tasted like innocence. I drove out to the overlook where she used to bring sketchbooks at sunset. The highway below glittered with traffic, endless motion resembling life trying to forget itself. I set her photo on the dashboard, whispered the same words from the first night after she died. Hold on, kid. I'm coming. Maybe not to death, but to peace. Behind me, thunder moved again over the hills. The war wasn't over, only paused between breaths. The shadow over our town was thinning now, not gone, but learning what daylight felt like. The sky looked wrong that morning. Too bright, too ordinary for what was coming. Harper and Blake waited by my driveway, both wearing expressions that carried more questions than words. Something had shifted overnight. The air itself carried it. Blake handed me his tablet. Source inside the penitentiary sent this. Mason's trying to record a statement. Private video meant for leverage. What kind of leverage? Insurance, Harper answered. He offered the feds names of higher UPS, but he kept one copy for himself in case they silenced him first. For a second, nobody spoke. Then I said what all three of us were thinking. We find that file before anyone else does. The prison compound sat hours north, old stone wrapped in new fences. Harper used her federal badge while Blake played tech consultant. Officially, we were a support team assisting digital archive transfer. Unofficially, we were ghosts walking a dying man's hall. A warden guided us to an evidence server room, bored expression masking hostility. Inmate Mason requested upload review yesterday, he said. Then he stopped answering intercom calls this morning. Stopped answering. That chill I hadn't felt in weeks crept down my neck. Where's his cell? I asked. He frowned. North wing. But access. I was already walking. The corridor smelled of cleaning solvent and rust. Cameras blinked with steady rhythm. Mason's cell stood open. Two paramedics crouched inside around a still body slumped beneath the cot. Cables tied from ceiling pipe. Eyes staring glass toward a world he thought he could own forever. The faint hum of monitors couldn't change what silence had already said. Harper whispered, "Autopsy will call it self-inflicted." But on his desk, a tablet blinked blue. Live recording paused mid-frame. The officer nearby started to reach for it. Harper flashed authority fast. Evidence. The man stepped back. Blake disconnected the tablet, handed it to me. The screen showed Mason's face minutes before death. Pale, hollow, eyes stripped of armor. I pressed play. His voice rasped like gravel. For years I told myself corruption kept order, that without control, chaos wins. Thought I was saving this town from itself. But I wasn't saving. I was feeding it. He looked into camera long, vacant. You want names. You already have them. They'll pretend they didn't know. Some didn't. Some did. Doesn't matter. There's always another Mason waiting for a badge. He paused, shoulders trembling. To Collins, yeah, the soldier. You were right. She didn't fall. His eyes flicked upward, wet from something too shallow for redemption. I remember the sound her neck made. I still hear it every night. The record froze on that frame. Date stamped from 3 hours before his death. Harper whispered, "Well, that's the end of his empire." But looking at him frozen there, I felt no triumph. Only the dull ache of things that finish without satisfaction. The confession reached every screen in the nation the next day. Legislative hearings reopened overnight. Investigations widened beyond our town. The country wanted cleansing and would use his words as soap strong enough to scrub anything. Reporters swarmed again, asking how it felt. I gave the only answer that mattered, like a man hearing silence after decades of noise. Mason's funeral was private, unmarked grave under county ground. No uniforms lined rows, no hymns. The wind handled all the ceremony worth having. Back in town, Harper packed up her office. Promotion waited in D.C. "You'll finally sleep," she told me. "Sleep needs peace," I said. "I've got work to make that exist." Blake planned to leave next, head north where storms were quieter. Before he left, he pressed an envelope into my hand. "Found this on Mason's confiscated drives," he said. Inside lay a security still, Brooke, months before her death, sitting with a group of community kids she'd been tutoring, laughing through stain of chalk dust. "She looks alive even in pixels," he said softly. "She always did." That evening, I returned to the overlook where everything began. The wind there carried pieces of every conversation we'd lived through. Ivy's whisper, Harper's tempered courage, thunder that never quite left. Below, city lights shimmered with cautious renewal. I took Mason's recorded statement, stored now on a single encrypted card, and placed it beneath a stone carved with Brooke's initials. "He spoke truths too late," I said. "You spoke them too soon. Either way, they're out now." The sun sank low, painting gold across the lake. For the first time, my chest loosened, not in happiness, but in relief deeper than breath. Some wars end without flags, just absence of fear. And somewhere between those last rays and the whisper of wind through grass, it felt like Brooke finally walked free from silence. The town finally slept again. No sirens, no headlines clawing for attention. Just the kind of silence that carries a heartbeat instead of fear. Months had passed since Mason's confession fractured the system that protected him. Some officers resigned quietly. Others testified, trying to buy back a sliver of dignity. The courthouse steps where Brooke's flowers once wilted were clean again, though faint stains from candle wax still marked the stone, reminders of nights when the world actually cared. I walked there at sunrise carrying a small plaque, Brooke Collins Community Center, for those who choose truth even when it costs everything. Her name would live where her dream once stood. Harper sent a photo from D.C., a congressional bill drafted under the new Reform Act, using portions of our case as precedent. Beneath the message she typed, "You did it, soldier." I didn't answer. This victory was never mine alone. It belonged to every whisper that refused to stay muted. That evening I drove to the lake where she used to sketch. The horizon bled orange across the water, the same color as the crayon she'd used to draw sunsets when she was little, sloppy, brilliant, unapologetic. Kneeling near the rock that hid Mason's recorded card, I spoke softly to the wind, not searching for ghosts this time, but sending gratitude into whatever place carries love after loss. "You were right, kid. Truth always surfaces. It just needs someone stubborn enough to hold their breath waiting for it." The ripples spread, carried into distance. And somewhere between those ripples and memory, I swear I could almost hear her laugh. No echo now, just freedom. As I walked back to the truck, the world felt lighter. People think revenge is loud. It's not. Real justice is quiet. It breathes peace where rage used to live. I looked once more at the road stretching ahead and felt the weight finally slide from my shoulders. Her story was finished, not erased, not rewritten, simply told. And maybe that's all we ever owe the people we lose, to tell their story cleanly, until silence turns honest again. Then I turned to the camera, voice steady, heart full. Before we leave this chapter, I want to ask you something. If you lost everything for the truth, would you still fight for it? Takes a breath. I'd really love to know. Tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what kind of stories you want next.